China announced this week it will stop granting permits for individual citizens to travel to Taiwan. Beijing's government views the island as part of its territory, but Taiwan views itself as an independent country.
Chinese officials said the decision was because of current relations between the two governments. Taiwan has criticized the move. So to talk more about this, CBSN contributor and senior fellow at the Asia Society, Isaac Stone-Fish, joins us now. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, what's really fascinating about this is that this will hurt Taiwan and perhaps even China economically. Yeah. Explain to our audience what this main disagreement, this bone of contention that has existed ever since Taiwan was founded.
So after 1949, when the Taiwanese side lost the Civil War, the two sides have been in disagreement about who owns Taiwan. And basically tensions have ebbed and flowed. And right now we have a situation where things are starting to look pretty dicey again, and Beijing wants to put its finger on the scales of the January 2020 Taiwanese election and have the Taiwanese people elect a candidate that's more supportive of Beijing.
Well, it's interesting this is also happening as there are protests in Hong Kong. It seems like China's really trying to tighten the belt on these parts of what it considers its country. Of course, people in those countries, in those places, don't necessarily consider themselves always part of China. Hong Kong technically is, but we're seeing that relationship really fraying right now. Why is China doing this now? And how is this going to impact its position with other international players like the U.S.? Of course, we're dealing with trade talks right now with China that are also falling apart.
Right. I think the Hong Kong story is very relevant to the Taiwan story in that Beijing has to be careful of not cracking down too hard on Hong Kong, which it would probably do otherwise, because that'll send a message to Taiwan that if you rejoin the motherland, this is the way that you could be treated. And in terms of how this plays into the relationship with the U.S., the U.S. Congress especially has been historically very supportive of Taiwan, very supportive of Hong Kong. And so the harder Beijing pushes there, the less leeway it's going to get on trade talks, which, as we're seeing with the recent announcement of more tariffs, are not going very well.
There was a moment when President Trump was first elected where protocol, decades of protocol, was seemingly broken. The president tweeting that he had spoken to the leadership in Taiwan, which is something that generally U.S. presidents did not do because of the not wanting to seem as if they were going to throw it in the face of China. And he didn't seem to care. But we haven't heard much from the White House about this.
We haven't. And it's funny, the decades of protocol between the United States and China, a lot of people today are saying, well, that actually benefits Beijing more than it benefits D.C. Taiwan, regardless of whether or not as a country, has been a good partner to the U.S. And why can't the U.S. president speak with the Taiwanese president? So I think there's people who are not supportive of Trump in a lot of what he does, but appreciate his willingness to think outside the box when it comes to China-Taiwan.
I thought it was really interesting, though. Yesterday, he wouldn't touch the Hong Kong issue. He was asked when he was about to fly out to Ohio for his rally, what do you think of the Hong Kong protests? He goes, what happens in China stays in China kind of thing, which the Chinese, of course, love to hear because that's how they want the rest of the world to view their internal affairs. But there's just so many mixed messages on the Hong Kong issue. The president seems to be saying something that pleases China. You just mentioned how we spoke to Taiwan's president, a few years ago. Then on trade, he's blasting China. Why isn't there more
of a coherent
strategy?
I think a lot of people in the White House are asking the same thing. And I think it is striking for him to not weigh in on something. I mean, Trump is a man who has a lot of opinions and is not afraid to share them. And we did just see those tweets where he talked about what China is doing and accusing China of not doing enough to stop the spread of deadly fentanyl into the United States. And it could be that he's trying to not push too hard on Beijing at this particular moment, or it could be that he just, at the time, didn't really have anything he wanted to add to the Hong Kong debate.
So you pointed out that Taiwan has an upcoming election. Who is Beijing's preferred candidate? I know that the current president of Taiwan is not someone that they've liked in the past.
Exactly. So there's a upstart mayor from a city called Kaohsiung, Mayor Han, and he is the candidate that wants to have better relations with Beijing. And there's a lot of rumors and talk going around about what his relationship is with Beijing today. And there's also a lot of people looking at the 2020 Taiwanese election for the question of election interference and thinking, oh, this could be a test ground for how Beijing meddles in foreign elections moving forward. So what happens in Taiwan certainly doesn't have to stay in Taiwan.
Can we talk about trade for a moment, given this big tariff news? It's interesting that the president set September 1st for the date that this 10% tariff would go into effect. Do you think he's really buying time and perhaps dangling a threat in front of the Chinese to get them to move? Or is there a reason, like I believe he mentioned that he wants to give the tankers that are moving across the Pacific time to deliver their shipments before this tariff is imposed?
Right. I think it's probably more the first one, allowing for the Chinese and the American side to negotiate something that the president can then say, hey, listen, I have a win. But I think we've been at this for so long that however kind of negotiation, however it resolves, it's still not going to solve the basic problems between the U.S. and China. So I think we're going to have a Band-Aid on this. If September 1st, Trump's able to say, hey, listen, I have a deal, I don't think it's going to last very long.
Really fascinating stuff. Isaac Stonefish, always great to have you.
Thank you.